The atmosphere in the room was cozy and quiet, with the warm glow of the living room lamp casting long shadows along the walls. James reclined on the sofa, a drink in hand, unwinding after a demanding day at the office. His shoulders still carried the weight of hours spent in meetings, but the comfort of home was starting to loosen the tension. Across from him, Emily, his wife, stood by the doorway with a knowing smile and a spark in her eye that seemed different tonight. But Emily wasn't alone. Standing beside her was Clara, her closest friend, who had been visiting more often lately. While their friendship had always been strong, tonight carried an energy that felt new, charged, almost electric, like a storm waiting to break. James, Emily's voice was soft as she stepped into the room. She placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder, and the two women exchanged a look that sent a ripple of something unspoken through the air. "I'll plan something special for tonight." James tilted his head, intrigued by her tone. "Oh, and what might that be, love?" he asked, a faint smile teasing at the corners of his mouth. Emily leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper as she glanced at Clara. "We've been talking," she said with a hint of mischief, "and we thought it might be fun to try something different." James blinked, his curiosity now piqued. He glanced between the two women, noting the way Clara's expression shifted to something shy yet bold, like she was holding back a secret she couldn't wait to share. Before he could respond, Emily stepped behind Clara, resting her hands on her shoulders in a gesture that felt both reassuring and daring. "Just trust me," Emily said, her voice full of confidence. "Tonight is about stepping into something new." Together, Clara moved closer, her presence both comforting and exciting in a way James couldn't fully understand yet. Her smile was soft, but carried a subtle confidence that drew him in. "Are you sure about this?" James asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Emily's eyes gleamed as she nodded. "Relax," she said gently. "Let's see where this takes us." The connection between the three of them lingered in the air, unspoken but undeniable, as the night stretched out ahead like a promise. Emily's voice was soft but brimming with intensity as she watched the scene unfold. "I know," she murmured, her dark eyes filled with anticipation. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it, darling?" Clara gave a small nod, her gaze never leaving James's. Slowly, deliberately, she moved closer, her presence filled with a quiet confidence that sent shivers through him. Her every movement seemed to carry a rhythm, a dance of unspoken emotions. James felt his breath catch as she reached out, her hands brushing over his chest, tracing the lines of his form with a tenderness that contrasted with the charged energy between them. "Emily," he gasped, his eyes fluttering closed for a moment as he tried to ground himself in the overwhelming sensations. Clara's touch was light yet deliberate, her fingers grazing his skin in a way that sent sparks through him. "Are you really okay with this?" he asked, his voice low but edged with uncertainty. Emily stepped closer, her warmth and steady presence reassuring him. "More than okay," she whispered, leaning in to press a gentle kiss to his temple. Her voice softened further, a blend of encouragement and affection. "Let go, James. Let Clara take the lead. Trust me." Clara's lips brushed his again, her kiss growing more urgent, filled with an intensity that left him breathless. James's hands found her waist, sliding up her sides as if mapping out every curve. The way she trembled beneath his touch only drew him in further. "Touch her more," Emily urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to see you lose yourself in this moment." James groaned, his movements becoming less hesitant, more instinctive. There was something intoxicating about the way Clara responded to him, the way her presence seemed to draw him out of himself. The room felt charged, every breath carrying an unspoken promise. every touch deepening the connection between them. As Clara moved closer, her hand brushed the line of his shirt, and James shivered at the deliberate slowness of her actions. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at Emily as if seeking permission. When Emily gave a slight nod, Clara's confidence seemed to surge, her eyes gleaming with a playful determination. "Are you ready for this?" Clara whispered, her voice low but teasing. James felt his pulse quicken, the weight of the moment pressing down on him in the best way possible. The room was filled with a blend of comfort and excitement, and as he glanced up at Emily, seeing the encouragement in her expression, he knew there was no turning back. "Yes," he said, his voice steady despite the storm within him. "I'm yours. Do whatever you want." Clara smiled at his words, her confidence now fully evident in every gesture. Slowly, she began to guide him, her hands moving with care and intention. Each touch, each moment, felt purposeful, drawing James deeper into the shared experience. Through it all, Emily watched, her gaze warm, yet filled with fascination. There was no jealousy in her expression, only a shared excitement as the evening unfolded in ways none of them could have imagined. Clara's voice was a soft murmur, her words almost teasing as she leaned in closer. "Yes," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. James groaned, his hands instinctively tangling in her hair, his body responding to every movement she made. "God, Clara," he breathed, his voice thick with longing. "I want more." Clara's lips curved into a playful smile as she glanced over at Emily. "Hear that?" she said with a mischievous edge. "He wants more?" Emily leaned forward, her excitement clear in her eyes as she encouraged Clara. "Then give him more," she purred, her voice soft yet commanding. "But make him work for it. Make him beg." Clara's smile deepened, a spark of delight lighting up her expression. She shifted slightly, moving closer to James, her movements deliberate and slow. Her hands trailed down his thighs, her touch light and teasing, sending a wave of tension through him. It was as if she was testing how far she could push him, and his reaction only fueled her confidence. "I want to hear you ask for it," Clara whispered, her lips brushing close to his ear. Her voice was low and tempting. "Tell me how much you want this. Tell me what you need." James's eyes shut tight, a low groan escaping him as he tried to keep himself together. Every word, every gesture, was a subtle but irresistible invitation. He had never felt so overwhelmed, so utterly caught in the moment. "Please," he said at last, his voice a rough whisper. "Please, Clara, I need this. I need you." Her smile turned playful as she leaned in closer, placing a lingering kiss on the corner of his mouth. "That's a good start," she murmured, her fingers trailing lazy patterns across his chest. "But I think you could do better." Before he could respond, Clara leaned in, her lips capturing his in a kiss that was deep and purposeful. There was nothing rushed about it. It was slow, almost methodical, yet completely consuming. James's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as he kissed her back, pouring every ounce of emotion into the moment. When they finally broke apart, his voice was barely audible, breathless with wonder. "You taste incredible," he murmured, his gaze meeting hers with a mixture of awe and desire. Clara chuckled softly, her hands resting on his chest as she gazed at him. "Then take what you want," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm yours." Something in her words sparked something deeper in him. With a low growl, he pulled her closer, his kisses growing more fervent. He trailed his lips down her neck, his touch deliberate yet gentle. Clara's breath hitched, her hands tangling in his hair as she leaned into him, her body trembling in response. "James," she gasped softly, her voice breathless, a mix of surprise and longing. He wasn't done. His hands moved over her sides, exploring the curves of her body as if he were memorizing every detail. Every touch, every kiss seemed to deepen the intensity of the connection between them. Clara responded with soft gasps, her fingers clutching at his shoulders as she surrendered to the moment. Through it all, Emily watched silently, her gaze filled with approval and fascination. The bond between them all was palpable, an unspoken understanding binding the three together as they let the night unfold naturally, with no rush, no expectations, only the electric connection that tied them together. "Do you like that?" James murmured, his breath warm against Clara's neck as his lips trailed back up to her ear. His voice was low and full of unspoken questions. "Tell me, Clara. I want to hear you." "Yes," she breathed, her voice breaking into a soft, desperate moan. "Yes, I love it. Please don't stop." Stopping was the furthest thing from James's mind. His hands moved instinctively, sliding lower as his fingers traced over her sides, pulling her closer. Their movements aligned, her body pressed flush against his. The warmth between them, even through the thin fabric of their clothing, was undeniable. Clara could feel every inch of him, and the intensity of it sent a shiver down her spine. She adjusted her position, her movements slow and deliberate, creating a rhythm that seemed to draw them even closer, leaving them breathless. James's breath hitched, and he groaned, gripping her hips as if to steady himself. "Oh, God," he muttered, his voice barely controlled. "Clara, you're driving me insane." "Good," she whispered, her lips curling into a teasing smile as she leaned in, her mouth brushing softly against his. "I want you crazy for me. I want you to beg." Her words sent a spark through him, igniting something raw and uncontrollable. With a deep, helpless moan, James cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. His lips moved against hers with a fierce, possessive hunger that left her breathless. Clara responded without hesitation, her fingers tangling in his hair as she poured all her desire into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, their breaths mingling, James's voice was a low, desperate growl. "Please," he murmured, his words filled with raw need. "Please, Clara. I need you. I need all of you." Her eyes met his, dark and shining with unspoken promises. "Then take me," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with conviction. "I'm yours, James. Do whatever you want." His hands moved slowly, deliberately, sliding down her sides as he traced the lines of her body. There was no rush. Every touch felt purposeful, as though he was savoring every detail. His fingers caressed the soft curve of her waist and hips, his reverence evident in the way he held her. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his voice soft and awestruck. As he kissed her neck, his lips lingered, leaving a trail of warmth along her skin. "I just want to make you feel amazing." Clara's breath hitched, her body trembling as his words and touch overwhelmed her senses. She could feel the deliberate way his hands and lips moved, each one a promise of something more. "Then do it," she whispered, her voice shaking with anticipation. "Make me feel everything." A low growl rumbled in James's chest as his grip on her hips tightened. James's kiss this time carried more intensity, leaving Clara breathless as she leaned into him. Her hands moved gently over his chest, the connection between them growing stronger with every passing moment. "I want you so much," James groaned, his voice rough with intensity. James's hands lingered near the edge of her dress, his touch light and intentional, as if savoring every moment. The contact sent a shiver through Clara as her breath came out in soft, uneven gasps. "James," she whispered, his name a breathless plea as she leaned into him, caught in the storm of their shared intensity. Clara's hands tightened on James's shoulders as she leaned closer. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I need this." But James wasn't in a hurry. His hands moved with an excruciatingly slow rhythm, caressing her thighs and tracing the curve of her hips with deliberate care. Each touch seemed to heighten her sensitivity, leaving her breathless and squirming beneath his touch. He could feel the way her body reacted to him, the subtle trembles and soft gasps that betrayed her emotions, and it sent a thrilling sense of control surging through him. "Do you want more?" he murmured, his lips brushing against her ear as he spoke in a voice that was equal parts teasing and commanding. "Tell me, Clara. Tell me how much you want this." "Yes," she gasped, her voice a desperate moan. "Yes, I want more. I want all of you, James. Please." With a low, satisfied growl, James's hands moved to her waist, pulling her even closer. Their movements synchronized into a slow, magnetic rhythm that left them both gasping softly. Clara's breath came in ragged moans, her body arching against his as her hands clung to him for support. "Oh God," she whimpered, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. "Please, I can't take it. I need you." James's response was a teasing smile, his hands gliding higher, tracing the fabric of her dress with a touch that was both tender and maddeningly slow. Her breath caught as she responded to him, her emotions surging with intensity. "Shoo," he murmured softly, his lips brushing her ear once more. "Relax, Clara. Let me take care of you." And with that, he leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss so slow and deliberate it left her toes curling. Clara's soft moans blended with the sound of their breaths, her hands finding their way into his hair as she poured every ounce of herself into that kiss. The world outside seemed to melt away, leaving only the two of them in their shared moment. "Please," Clara gasped when they finally broke apart, her voice barely a whisper. "I need you. I need all of you." James's gaze was intense as he held her close, his hands tightening on her hips. "I want you to feel everything tonight," he murmured softly, his voice filled with quiet intensity. "You're mine, Clara. All mine." His touch was deliberate, his presence grounding, as he let each moment linger, every gesture speaking volumes. Clara shivered beneath his touch, her body trembling with the overwhelming sensation of being completely seen and desired. When their eyes locked, time seemed to pause. The world outside faded into nothingness as they shared a moment of stillness, a quiet exchange that spoke louder than words ever could. Finally, Clara pulled back slightly, her breath uneven and her cheeks flushed. She brushed a strand of hair from James's forehead, her gaze soft yet filled with mischief. "Was that what you wanted?" she asked, her voice tender. James nodded, his smile a mix of warmth and longing. "More than you know." Her lips curved into a playful smile as she leaned down to kiss him gently, savoring the moment before slowly standing. As she adjusted her dress, she cast one last look at him, her eyes sparkling with a teasing glint. "We should do this again sometime," she whispered, her voice light and full of promise. James watched her walk away, his heart pounding in his chest as the feel of her touch lingered on his skin. As Clara disappeared around the corner, he knew deep down this wasn't over. Whatever had started between them tonight, it was only the beginning.